Welcome to the speaker series on a shot glass of recovery. This podcast is a place for real stories, honest conversations, and recovery lived one day at a time. The views and opinions shared here are simply our own personal experiences. We do not speak for or represent Alcoholics Anonymous as a whole.
You get a house, you get a car, then you start thinking that's all you are, but you don't know the truth. So let me spell it out for you. Now I got your attention, now there's a start. Now sit and listen to my favorite part. Life's been giving us some clues. The answer lies inside of you.
Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. My name is Paula Parton, and I'm an alcoholic from Champaign, Illinois. I know it's a funny name from alcoholic to be from. My home group is the Sunday Women's Closed Big Book Study. We're hybrid in Champaign. So it's at 12:30 on Sundays, and you can find the Zoom information at ECI-AA-org. ECI stands for East Central Illinois. So we'd love to have women on here because it's Women's Week. So I want to start by saying I'm having some interesting technological challenges. No problem. I'm just on my phone instead of my iPad. So interesting things may happen. We're just going to roll with it. That's what we do. I want to thank my sweet friend, Carolina. I can't believe she's up in the middle of the freaking night. Girl, you are the poster child of willingness. Swear to God, man. That's what you are. And you always call me a giant. You're a giant, girl. I mean, Jesus. I mean, come on, man. If all of us on here did not have a drink all day, it's a miracle of the entire ages. If that's as good as it got, it's a miracle. And I'm here for it. My sobriety date is October 29th, 1979. I took my first drink when I was 14 years old. I took what I didn't know would be my last drink when I was 17 years old, when you found me a place at your banquet. And I will tell you this, I came from an alcoholic home. It has nothing to do with anything about me. It's just how the things that the tools that I got to use through the formula of the 12 steps to find peace and freedom, and for God to do God's magic freaking math, which is beautifully summed up on page 124 in our big book when it says cling to the thought that in God's hands, the dark past is the greatest possession we have. And I guess before I jump in, I also want to talk a hot minute about my life now. I'm married in May. It'll be 28 years to a beautiful, sweet, introverted, lovely, kind, supportive, 100% normal man. If I get to a podium or to a conference or any kind of a service like that, it's because that man got up at 5 a.m. to get me to the airport. It's because that man watches our difficult rescue animals that I insist we get. It's because that man was willing to do all that stuff, though he has never, I was 18 or 19 years sober when he and I even met. So he's never lived around active alcoholism, and he has also never taken an alcoholic drink in his life. Nevertheless, he loves Alcoholics Anonymous. And I have 3 sons. I have them all far into my sobriety. And if you are a parent or a loved one of a child who is coming to your life, you know, do not lie. You're watching them if they have the ism. You know that you are. And I was too. And my oldest son for sure, 100% for sure. And where I'm sitting right now, this isn't the usual place I speak from. I'm not even at my house. I'm 4 hours south of my house in Louisville, Kentucky, in my friend Cindy M's. If you ever heard her speak, Cindy M's home. And this is called the Princess Bedroom. I don't think it's, a coincidence. This is the bedroom they always give me. Anyway. But because I'm here visiting my son, my sober son, who in June is going to Founders Day with me. And at the end of June, if he doesn't take a drink one day at a time, he'll celebrate 2 years of recovery. And come on now. If you were with me for any part of the 10 years before he got sober, man, I was not handling that well. I kept the bridge open to him by just keeping it light and tight. I mean, for 10 years, I talked about basically nothing but Netflix and Marvel superheroes. I mean, just light and tight, because if the day ever came that he sought help, it will not have been on me to have burned that bridge. So I made the bridge clear and easy to come across. And so did the people of Alcoholics Anonymous, made that bridge for him easy and light to come across. He's in the next room. He doesn't like to hear me talk. I can't imagine. It's like my second favorite thing to do besides sleep. Joking. But I got to pick him up from the facility he's in, and we're going to get to spend the weekend together. And so I'm going to jump into my story as my higher power is guiding me. If you've ever shared your story, you're listening to your higher power at the same time. You're trying to, at the same time, is that God or is that me? And then put words to whatever is coming. So that's how I roll. And every time before I get up to speak, and my name is, I'm being introduced, and I'm just about to stand up at the podium or like turn on my microphone so I can talk on Zoom. I imagine myself at the front line, and standing with me is the God of my understanding. And my God looks down at me, and I look up at my God, and my God holds out his hand, and I grab his hand, and we look at each other and we say, here we go. So here we go. I grew up in Central California, where my father was wealthy and influential, and we had the kind of house that goes with a daddy like that. We had a maid and a pool man and a gardener, and then the four hideous horsemen of alcohol entered our home and my poor mama, and one by one, as a little 5-6-year-old girl, I watched all those things leave, and one of those things to go was my father and his wealth and influence. And then after he left, we were poor and hungry, with a famous last name. So I'm telling you, the hunger, the filth, the poverty was real, but the secret, because of the last name, was fierce. There was no telling anybody what was happening behind those doors. And man, I love my mom, man. And she was under the lash of that liquid master, who is also, as Bill Wilson said, a power greater than we are. And my mama didn't mean to let those men in, and she didn't mean to have them do stuff to me as a little girl. If she could have been strapped up to a lie detector test and asked, will you ever let that happen? She'd have said no and passed the test. Same as us. What I know from my mother's alcoholism, from my children's alcoholism, is this fact: a mother's love is not more powerful than alcoholism. There is only one power more powerful than alcoholism. And when I got to you, all I could still say was maybe, maybe. And that was enough. Because God and Alcoholics Anonymous met me where I was, and God and Alcoholics Anonymous will meet you right where you are, take you by the hand, and lead you onto the broad highway. And all you have to do, if you can't take the whole thing, is say, maybe. I was one of those little kids, in a neighborhood, one of those troubled kids. Every neighborhood has one. I was, always saying inappropriate stuff. I knew too much stuff for a little girl, and I was filthy, and my hair smelled, and I smelled, and my hair was matted, and I had the wrong clothes for the season it was in. I don't have any emotion about this. I mean, the beautiful formula of Alcoholics Anonymous and any help that has led me to, I'm clean and clear. I'm just saying this is the path that was my path. And it wasn't that long ago, really. Some few years ago, I was looking at the first step, and it's the only one with the dash in the middle of it, by the way. And I used to teach English, and I still don't understand that damn dash. But I was looking at it, and I realized we can not just apply that first step to the beginning of our sobriety. We can also apply it to the end of our drinking. So check it out, man. The first part of the first step, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol. 100%. Absolutely. We take a drink, the drink takes a drink. And then that dash. And Bill Wilson wrote it so easy to swallow, so easy to say, yes, yes, such a graceful way to say after the dash, and that our lives have become unmanageable. What a pretty way to say dead on arrival, jail until sentencing, broken, homeless. But I was thinking about this, man, like There's few tests in our literature, our 12 by 12 in our big book that Bill wrote to see if someone's an alcoholic, to see if you're an alcoholic. You know what they are. But and even then it says you may be an alcoholic, just leaving it open, man. No pressure. The bridge is light and tight and easy to get across. But I'm saying, man, if after the dash of your drinking, if after you took that drink and what happened after that drink, after that dash was unimaginable to you before you took that drink, you just may be an alcoholic. When I was little, after my mama's alcoholism, I don't remember a whole year of it, and that's okay. God will help me realize more or not. It's okay. It's all for service anyway. But there's some things I don't know how neurons work like this. There's some things that are like I'm standing there right now. I'm 63 years old, and so this was a long time ago. I was like 6 years old, and I was wandering the neighborhood as I always did with my weirdo, smelly self, and it must have been dinner time because I could see into the neighbor's picture window. And I mean, swear to God, like I'm standing there right now, man. And I thought it was probably dinner time because I could see into their picture window. And what I saw on the other side of that window struck me still. I'd never seen such a thing. And they were sitting at a table together. And they were laughing together. And they were looking at each other. I can see it right now. And talking. And I remember the food. I remember the colors of the food. I'd never seen such a thing. And I remember a tiny little girl on the far side of that great green grass looking at that beauty, that golden place on the other side of that window, knowing to the depths of my toes that beauty was never going to be for the likes of me. Dirty, throwaway me. And I'm telling you this, I did not see or sense that exact kind of beauty again until I entered my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. My mom moved us from cool California to a place that had become a state, apparently, called Nebraska. Please, you would drink too. And to a tiny little town where she'd grown up. Grand Island, for God's sakes. Why are they calling it an island? There's a river. What are they talking about? Anyway, I mean, I'm the youngest of 5 kids, and my mom moved back to the place she grew up because she wanted to try to get sober, and she did get sober almost to the day I took my first drink. So my older brothers and sisters had gotten away with murder. Now all of a sudden there's consequences, and there's like things like forks and dinner time and responsibility and like manners. I mean, I'm a wild, feral kid. And all of a sudden, my mom's sober, and my house is full of AA people all the damn time. And I had just fallen in love with the liquid master myself. And the thing is this, man, the day before I took my first drink at 14 years old, if you'd have asked me, will I ever drink? I'd have said no with passion and passed the test because I'd seen what it did to my mama. I could smell it on those men. I swore I hated alcohol. I hated God because I begged God to help me. And to me, God had just thrown me away, made me for junk, made me for a joke. That's what I would have said God is. That's what God was to me. And I hated myself. And I went out the next night. My friends handed me 1 bottle of TJ Swan, Easy Nights wine, drank it. 2nd bottle, drank it. 3rd bottle, drank it. And if you're here tonight, you know what happened next. You know what happened next. Before even the first probably few guzzles got through me, all of a sudden I could look the world in the eye. All of a sudden, I'd find a higher power I could turn my will and my life over to. All of a sudden, I'd been rocketed into a 4th dimension of existence. The problem is for us that alcohol promises us those things. And we think that feeling we felt at that first drink means it delivered. It's not true. It is the greatest liar, thief, manipulator there ever was because alcohol promises us everything that Alcoholics Anonymous delivers. And I was off. I was enraged at what those men had done. My mom who'd let them all. I was enraged and had an organ of hate all the time. And so you can sum up my years of drinking. I was incarcerated, enraged, and baffled. That's it. Those are the ways you could sum it up. And every time I'd have to go to court, because I was a ward of the state at that point, I was a juvenile delinquent, spending time in group homes and craziness and jail and craziness. And I was always hanging around more and more dangerous people because, why do we think there's such a thing as enough? It's still, it's so odd to me that people will like try to be walking through someone they love who's an active alcoholic, and they'll think, well, when they hit bottom, that will be enough. Please, we are exactly the people who don't know enough. That's exactly who we are. What happens to us is we lower the bar until we reach the point of no return. We have all lost people to this disease. They did not mean to die. In their best self, they would not have gone that way. They reached the point of no return. No one knows where that is for each of us. No one knows where that place is. My son, who's here with me at Cindy's house, he reached out to me about a year and 9 or 10 months ago, and he said, "Mom, my anxiety's off the chain." He says, "Can you pick me up? Can we go to the clinic?" And I said, "Sure," because bridge is light and tight. So I picked him up, and they took his blood pressure at the clinic, and it was 188 over 115. And they said, "Sir, you're not going home. You're going to the emergency room." So we raced across town, got to the emergency room, and my son had told me later, a few days later, that he hadn't had a drink for 7 hours. He didn't smell. He wasn't drunk. He didn't smell like alcohol. He was a 31-year-old man at that time. It would have been 7 hours since he'd taken a drink. And so he's in the emergency room. For some reason, the emergency room doctor walked up to him and asked him how much he drinks. And for some reason, he told her the truth, which was 12 to 14 shots of vodka every night till he blacked out. So she said, "This isn't your anxiety. You're in alcohol withdrawal. Now, come on now. How hard does just a human physical body have to drink to just 7 hours be in that kind of withdrawal?" He was 1 minute away from a heart attack or a stroke. And so they put him in ICU, strapped him down with a padded bed and 5 nurses on him. And then the hallucinations began. And I had the honor and the dumb luck to get to sit with my baby boy and walk him through those 4 nights. And his willingness never wavered. And I'm going to tell you why. Because something happened. Something like Bill Wilson talked about in his story in the Big Book. When Evie walked in, he said there was something about his eyes. What it was inexplicable, he wrote. And then he asked in his story what had happened. Now, if he could have gone back after he got sober and taken that word, there was something about his eyes, and made it to a capital S something, he'd have been able to answer his own question. Something happened. Something happened for all of you too. Something happened for my son. What had happened is a year before that fateful day where we went to the ER, he had also tried to get sober. And he had to go to a conference with me because my flight had got canceled in the middle of the night. When he called for help, I said, "I have to drive to a conference in the mountains. Will you want to come?" He goes, "Sure." So after 2 days, he's starting to think that he'd overreacted. You remember that? I'd overreacted. Every 30-year-old wets the bed every once in a while. Come on. I'm thinking, "Oh, no." But what I'm saying is keeping the bridge light and tight. I'm saying that might work for you. But I'm thinking like a mama would, And just at that moment, as I'm about to turn on my car and head 6 hours north to go home where I knew he wasn't going to make it, I got a text on my phone that my sweet sponsor, Polly, 1,000 miles away in Jacksonville, Florida, who'd been caring for her very, very, very sick husband in a long, long health demise, that hospice had just put her husband on morphine. And we all know the clock is ticking. So I looked to my son. I said, "I can't go home. I got to go straight from the Ozark Mountains and drive as fast and far as I can to try to make it the 1,000 miles to Jacksonville, Florida, try to catch our girl. I said, "Will you help me drive?" And he said, "Yes." And so my son's real first experience, his real first something with a capital S, was in the environment of when Sweet Dave Pistol died, and everyone in the world of Alcoholics Anonymous loves Polly. So he saw all those people coming in. He saw people loving and showing up. He saw Polly even beginning to laugh. He saw all that. And Polly, we were there about a week. And so Polly was like, she'd like stroke his arm and she'd say, "You're my grandson now." And that, so a year later, a year after that, that was his introduction to Alcoholics Anonymous. It never left him. Just like that beautiful vision I had when I saw those people on the other side of that great, beautiful golden picture window. It made an impression on him. And then what happened for me is that my first AA meeting I ever had to go to, I was court mandated to go because I was on probation. I was 14 years old. It was 1976 in the middle of Nebraska. That wasn't happening. There was a 14-year-old in the middle of Nebraska in the mid 1970s was not showing up at meetings, but I had to because my probation officer was an AA and also a friend of my mom. Like a miscarriage of justice, something. But here's what I'll tell you: the something that happened for me. 3 years of being court mandated to go to meetings until I turned 17 in 1979 and said my first sacred maybe, as I already told you, and got sober. But I remember my first meeting, again, like I'm standing there right now, man. Everybody was a friend of my mom. I was never all the way sober at any meeting I went to, and I certainly was not all the way sober at that one, my first one at 14 years old. And I knew they were going to come for me because I'd been horrible to my mother. I tried to kill her with a homemade flamethrower in her first year of sobriety. So please, I mean, no, she needed to turn custody of me over to the state, but I knew they were going to. So I was all braced up, ready for them to come screaming up my face. And I walked down the basement to that old nasty old church clubhouse. And I'm scanning the room for who's coming for me first, thinking I'm all tough, 14 years old. And across the room, I saw like the Grand Poobah of Alcoholics Anonymous in Nebraska. And I'll never forget it, man, because I knew for sure he and my mom were good friends. He was going to come at me as I'm all braced up, and I will never forget it. He's bent over talking to someone, and he sees me. He turns his head and he sees me, and he smiles. And he stands up and puts out his hand and crosses that entire room to greet me like I was a person or something. And for the next 3 years, like I said, I don't remember a word that was said in any of those meetings I had to go to. But when I was 17 and said my first sacred maybe, I did remember how they had made me feel. That was the something that showed up for me. Alcoholics Anonymous at its finest. So when I was 17, I was aging out of the juvenile justice system. I was just about to be put into the adult penal system, go to prison, grown-up prison, and that's just how it was. And I went to court again, and they found alcohol all over my possessions and said you can go to court until sentencing, which was I'd broken probation so many times it was going to be prison. You can go to jail until sentencing, or you can go to a treatment center. Now, come on, what would anybody say? What did I do? I sat there for 20 minutes trying to decide. Like, who does that? What happened in the first minute was I was trying to think of a lie I hadn't told yet, fresh out. The next 19 minutes, I was sitting there trying to fathom, how do you be a lie and not drink? And I didn't know. But I said, I'll go to treatment. So they took me to a place in Iowa where I got sober, man, in Sioux City, Iowa, more cows and corn and no islands. But man, it worked. I'm about to go back there in June. I'm still in touch with people I got sober with. How about that? I'm going back there in June to celebrate a friend who helped me get sober, 50th anniversary in sober and Alcoholics Anonymous, man. Like, so lucky. And when I got to you, man, I didn't know anything. I was more feral than human. I was a savage girl from a savage place, still furious, still thinking it was my mom who should be in trouble. If I'm an alcoholic, it's her fault. All that terminal uniqueness, angry all the time. I was the worst newcomer ever. I'd come to meetings late on purpose because more people look at you that way. I wore clothes that did not belong on a stripper pole. I mean, and I would sit in the back. I was one of those outliers in the back of the room, man, with my arms crossed. I'd gossip about everybody in the first level. Then I'd walk upstairs to the meeting and sit in the back, all angry, arms crossed. And you think us weirdos in the back aren't listening. It's opposite. We're hyper focused. As a matter of fact, what we're doing is seeing how you act in the other 23 hours of your life, besides the stuff you say in that 1 hour of an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. So I, as an outlier, am telling you some of the best service work you will ever do is live sober in the other 23 hours of your life. Live recovered in the other 23 hours of your life. Because I didn't even care to be alive. Outliers don't. We don't care. We don't care. But the beauty of you, man, caught my eye. And I'm telling you this, if all around me had not been in darkness, had not been total darkness, I would not have been able to see your light. And I could hear you say things like deep inside every man, woman, and child is a fundamental idea of God. I hear you say that. And I think, oh, maybe for you, but not for me. God had treated me like trash. I begged God to help me when I was a little girl. But you were also honorable. Not one man made me feel some kind of creepy way, said some kind of creepy thing. It had happened in every institution I'd ever been in. And only because you were all so honorable, I could at least believe that you believed. And that was enough. My second step was the same as my first step, where I could just say, maybe. And God and AA can do something with that. Remember, I couldn't get a big book. That was for you older people. I was 17, too cool for that. I had tattooed big toes. I mean, I was so cool. I couldn't get a sponsor because I couldn't find anybody smarter than me. Such a dilemma. It's just insanity. And I had zero social skills. I was a little lonely because I hated men and I really hated women. It's insane. I got a job as a nurse's aide when I was about 3 years sober, and I had zero social skills, just a savage person, went to 5 meetings a day. That's how I made it. And I'm telling you, it was the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous that got me sober, just like our literature says in the big book, that it says the fellowship is a sufficient substitute for alcohol. And it is. It is not, though, a sufficient substitute for alcoholism. That can only come through the formula of our AA literature, the formula of our 12 steps. That gives a sure outcome if we follow every step of the formula. Or if you like to cook, call it a recipe. You can't make a chocolate cake without flour. You can't get peaceful and easy. You can't be happy, joyous, and free. You can't be of real service to your fellow humans unless we follow every single piece of that formula. No shortcuts anymore. People were so kind to me and had no reason to be, had not every logical reason not to be, but they were kind anyway. And so I could begin also to say, maybe there's something here, maybe even for me, because you were such an example. You were proof that something with a capital S, something was working for you. And you had told me it could work for me too. So to come in a little bit further, sit down a little bit longer, listen a little bit more closely, begin to ask for help. My father appeared back in my life when I was about 4 years sober, and he said he'd pay for me to go to college. That was a challenge. I'd had 2 senior years of high school. I graduated 382nd out of a class of 384. You take an ACT, one of the college entrance exams. If you ace it, you get it, all completely, perfectly right. You get a 36. I get a 4 on my ACT. I mean, how? I didn't even know they could grade it that low. But I found a college back in Nebraska that would take somebody like me. I'm so grateful for those institutions who give people like me second chance. And I started college at 4 years sober. I graduated when I was 8 years sober. I triple majored. I was on the honor roll. I fell in love with academia. And that's the least of the miracles that happened in that tiny little college town in Nebraska. The most important thing that happened is that I fell in love with the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous in the nick of time. Most particularly with the 4th step, and most particularly with the 4th column of the 4th step. Because Honorable You had told me there was a shot at freedom, even for me. And it was to be found in the 4th column of the 4th step. So I got a sponsor that took me through the literature and the work and the recovery of Alcoholics Anonymous and began the real work of recovery. A 4th step is basically, the imagery of it is, think of like we're in a court of law, and there's a prosecution table and there's a defense table. And in those first 3 columns of the grudge list, they call it in our literature, I'm sitting at the prosecution table and I am making my case, prosecuting people, institutions, and principles, including myself, that had done me wrong. I am making a hell of a case. And then I lay it to rest. I lay the prosecution rest. And at that point, I stand up from the prosecution table, walk to the defense table, sit all the way down, and begin my defense in my fourth column of the fourth step of the very people, institutions, and principles that I had just gotten done prosecuting. It's nothing different than that. I've gone through the steps since, so I turned 40 years sober. I don't know when, but 6 years ago. But we were in lockdown, and my friend Marty J from Vancouver took a whole bunch of us in the middle of COVID through Zoom, through the he calls it the Lion series. It's just straight out of the Big Book. It's nothing but out how to do the steps out of the Big Book. Nothing but something amazing happened. I mean, I was 40 years sober, and I had done plenty of inventory straight out of our literature. And what I had not done ever is put the third step or the fear inventory in columns. I just like made a list or said what I wanted God to I mean, I didn't even think of it. And it was magic what happened. I put in my third step straight out of straight out of the Big Book. No, nothing else but right out of the Big Book. The first column, what won't I turn over to God? And at that time, it was 6 years ago, I wrote that my boys will die of alcoholism. And in the middle column, why am I holding on to this? Why won't I let this go to God? And I had to really go into inventory, and I had to really think and really be introspective and meditation. And what I realized at 40 years sober, you guys, is that why I was holding on to that, why I was bemoaning that they were already dead, why I was crying about what happened next, about what they did next, all these things for 10 years before that inventory, is because what I thought I was doing was paying forward on the pain. That if the worst happened and I lost my boys to alcoholism, I will have already paid part of the price, and it may not break me. And in the third column of that third step work is the question, what would God have me be? And I had to go into meditation again. And what I realized my God told me is, what would God have me be? Alive. That's what. Stop throwing away the few moments of a year they would spend time with me. Stop bemoaning the fact of where diseases can end sometimes. Stop wasting the joy of this moment. And so I could do just that. A few years ago, I was in Rome. Boy, time goes by fast. I was in Rome with my friend Holly, and we had been there many times. And so on that trip, we were just walking down a pretty boulevard and going into different churches, and it's Rome, so like every other building. And I will tell you, for someone with as much time, I guess, as I'm sober, how I spent all the days of my son's drinking is that on my best, most spiritually connected days, that I knew that if the worst happened and I lost my son to alcoholism, and if you've heard my story, I've spent a minute in the fourth dimension, that I knew when I was spiritually connected that at least I would see him again. There were days when I was spiritually connected in the midst of my son's drinking, that I knew if the worst happened and I lost my son to alcoholism, that at least he would be at peace. And he would not have to look at me and be embarrassed ever again. And on all the other days, I begged God to save my son. And this day in Rome was a begging God day. Rome, as I'm sure you know, is a city with great poverty and great wealth. There are many people affected by homelessness, many people begging and needing help everywhere. And so I went into a church and knelt and lit a candle and begged God. And this next part, as I'm so embarrassed, I don't think I could look at you to tell you what I did, but there was a young man at the church doors sitting, and he was homeless, affected by homelessness, and he needed help, and he was asking for help. And I walked right past him. And I didn't go but 2 steps where I thought, what are you doing? And I stopped and I turned around and I got to his level, eyeball to eyeball, and gave him a moment of compassion and humanity. and gave him some money. And what I knew when I got up to walk away is this, that I cannot beg God to save the lives of my sons and then walk right past another mother's son. That it didn't at that time look like I was going to have the grace or the luck to save my own children, but I could be there for hers. That somewhere in the whole world, his mother was pleading and begging too. And she could not be there to save her son, but I could be there to help her son, and that would have to do. Even though I had done many, many 4 steps straight out of the big book, I still had this organ of hate and for those men and what my mother had left them and all that stuff that happened after the dash of her alcoholism. And I wanted it gone. I did. Every 4 step I did, I wanted it gone. It was a perfect, people say we can only do the first step perfectly. We don't take a drink perfectly one day at a time. But I'm telling you, you do a real 4th and 5th step straight out of this with the help of a sponsor who knows the literature. When you get to 6 and 7, you are perfectly willing to have that stuff removed. But God created time. God holds the copyright on time. I'm not in charge of when those defects are removed. Only God is. God invented love also. God's in charge of love also. I don't get to say what it looks like or when I have enough of it or the right kind. God's in charge of that. And though I had done many 4 steps straight out of the big book, enough of an outside thing and the doom would come or the rage would come or the fight or die would come and the overreaction. And I knew its source. And I was 13 years sober. It's before I married my husband, St. Richard, people call him, which is rude. I had a first husband, boy meets girl on AA campus, and everybody said, don't marry him. So I married him. Hello. And I was 13 years sober, and we were going in to deliver our first child. And the motto, I think, the slogan or whatever of my entire sobriety is, you never know. I got a big life in AA. I got a big life outside of AA. There are spiritual conditions happening all over in my life, not just in the rooms of AA. I have a big old spiritual life outside of AA. And you never know, man. We are to do the work. Let the light shine. Get over to that defense table, man. Learn compassion. And God will do in God's time what God needs to do. So we were in the delivery room, and it was not going well. I'd been in labor for 36 hours, and the baby was stuck in the birth canal. And they didn't know it, but the cord was wrapped around his neck. And so with every contraction, you know, I was on no drugs. At that moment, the room emptied of the normal doctor and normal equipment and normal nurses and filled with the specialists. And at that moment, I looked to this side of my bed, and walking up to my bed was my grandmother who had died 10 years before, and my friend Craig, who had died of AIDS just 5 months before. And I don't have the word of what they felt like. Something of beauty, something of perfection, something of course you're here. Of course you've always been here. It was just that the veil was so thin, and I had lost so much blood. I thought they were there for me, but they were not there for me. And at the same moment that I'm looking at them, a new nurse comes on, and she says to me, Paula, I'm going to get you through this. And when I look back, my grandmother and Craig were gone. She did get me through, and I delivered my son. The room went silent for a long time while they worked on him. And after a while, they did get him breathing. They brought him back to life. But he was sick, and he was weak, and he was going to have to stay in the hospital for just 1 second, 1 minute before they took him away in the special equipment. They let me hold my son, and I looked down on him, and I saw that he was perfect and beautiful. And then, out of nowhere, for no reason, my next thought was of the men who had hurt me when I was a little girl. And I realized for the first time that they had been perfect and beautiful too. And someone else had turned them to monsters. And who better than me anyway to have compassion for what must have been done to those beautiful little baby boys? And it was in compassion where I was set free. It continues to be in compassion where I am set free. If someone has harmed you, I am sorry. There are things that you do not have a place in your forestep where you were to blame. Those are the hardest ones to find peace in. You can see that I know that now. But compassion is always the place to start from, because enough of my life was taken for the darkness. I will not allow another minute of it to be thrown away. And God has used exactly my dark past as my greatest possession in my service work for others. And it happens in amazing, surprising ways. I learned to tell it all, to not keep secrets. Back when I was back in undergrad and 5-ish years sober, back in that little town in Nebraska, there was this old timer named Pat. And he was sober 32 years. And me and my little sober friend had like 4 or 5 years sober. So, he was like Moses, basically. And he worked out of a second edition. I mean, Jesus, that's how amazing and long sober he was. And him and his wife Bess would take me and my little friend around to AA meetings. I mean, so great. And one thing about Pat, he was a great man of Alcoholics Anonymous. But there were 2 things about him. One of those things is he had gotten in a fight with a little local recovery clubhouse manager 32 years before. So he could still tell you in detail what that guy had done, and he wouldn't go back to that meeting. So he had a resentment. And the other thing about Pat is he had been a soldier in World War II. He had fought on the Western Front, if you're familiar with that conflict. And I'm a historian. I have my graduate degree in history, and one of my specializations is World War II. Don't do that because there's no jobs. Just heads up. And it costs a lot of money to get that anyway. But so because he knew I was a historian in undergrad as well, he knew I understood that conflict in a particular academic way. So he would tell me, and only me, horror stories of things he had seen as a 17 and 18-year-old soldier do in that hedgerow fighting on the Western Front. I mean, horror stories. But he'd end every one of those stories with this. He'd say, "But Paula, there is one thing I will never tell." I was like, what? There's something you'll never now not tell? The things he told me are still burned into my brain. And I always wondered, what is that thing? What's the other thing he saw that he won't tell? And so I wondered. And a year later, me and my friend graduated. We moved to the East Coast. I have to shut up in 2 minutes. And we moved to the East Coast. We got a call that Pat, with 32 years of sobriety, had started drinking. He was dead in a year. And I put down the phone. I said, "Pat is drinking." My friend said, "You know what it was? It was that resentment." I said, "You know what it was? It was that secret." And all this time, all these years later, in graduate school, I've always looked for that thing he would not say. And now I know what it was. I'd bet every dollar that I have, and I would win the bet. That thing the Pat would not say is not something that he saw. It was something that he did. And the shame and the hate and the secret took 32 years to kill such a man. Tell your secrets. Tell your secrets. Imagine all the people he could have helped. He could have done the transformation of this magic math of a God of the universe. I'm going to end with this. A long time ago, my sister and I was about 4 years sober, we were driving across the whole country one day before Christmas Eve. And we were in Iowa. We had my little baby niece, and my car died. We were in the middle of nowhere, no lights, no signs, no nothing. It was 0 degrees, and we were in danger. Just at that moment, saw these 2 headlights. It was a farmer, and he got out and he said, "You need help." He fixed my engine with duct tape and a wire coat hanger. And so it was one day before Christmas Eve, and he says, "Okay, everything's good now." And we're like, "Stop, we want to pay you." He goes, No. We said, "Stop. You saved our lives. We want to pay you." And he said, "Take it as a present from him." So if you are here tonight and you think there's something wrong with you that's not wrong with outside of the rest of us, if you think what you have done was too much or what was done to you was too much, you can see now that I understand. And I am asking you to just say maybe and take it as a present from him. Thank you.
Thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule to enjoy a shot glass of recovery. If you'd like to help support the show, you can make a voluntary contribution through PayPal at A Shot Glass of Recovery. Every donation, no matter the amount, helps cover the costs of producing the podcast and allows us to keep sharing stories of hope and recovery. Thanks again for your support. It truly means a lot.
Everything you do, the answer lies inside you.